Hi guys, my name is Victoria Bardovich. I'm going to be starting a bit of a vlog, an episode 1, a pilot of a series that I'm going to do about sacred sexuality, about leadership, where I feel like the industry is going, what I desire for myself and what I see is possible. And I want to explore these ideas through a bit of an episode format, because I feel like when I start to track something like this, there's often a lot of people that are feeling similar feelings and knowing different things, and I would love to hear opinions, experiences, all those kind of things, so that I can understand more of what I feel is happening in the world. So a bit of an overview of where I've come from to start with, and then I'll share a little bit about what I see as possible for the future. So I think I was like 17 when I first started recognizing that I wanted to work with people in the space of sexuality. This looked like me standing in my parents' garden and being like, yeah, I really feel like that's what I want to go do with my life. But at the time I hadn't had sex. I didn't really know anything about it, but it was like always this sort of like niggling desire to understand more about what this was about. Fast forward a couple of years, I started to become that person that people will speak to all the time, sharing with their premature ejaculations, erectile dysfunctions, numbness, not being able to orgasm. All those kind of conversations were just like flooding into my life from strangers, people I knew, anybody really. I then went on to do a degree in counseling and opening up this understanding of how I was going to work out how I could help people in this way. I studied a lot of counseling, I studied a lot of coaching, and then I started deepening into the space of knowing how to help people with sexual problems. But it's sex bod, International School of Temple Arts, working with some big like pioneers at the time in the sexuality space that were doing de-armoring, orgasmic meditation, all the people that were doing anything and connected to sexuality, I was interested in. Reading a lot of books as well. Come 2016, I sat with ayahuasca and I really had an awakening of like, yeah, this is in you, this is what you need to bring to the world. And one of the things that I was told at the time was that you need to have this name, Tantric Witch. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's so radical. Like, how can I go back to Australia with this Tantric Witch brand? Anyway, I did it. And then as I did it, I started to see there was a lot of other sex witches and people that were having a similar experience of like bringing themselves forward in these more interesting ways. And so, you know, I really wasn't as radical as I thought I was, but also it was nice for me that I recognized that I wasn't alone inside of this experience. So I started calling in clients and working with them, and some of the problems that I was tracking around the time of like 2016, 2017 was the hashtag Me Too movement. And yeah, that was big in the world, but it was also really big in the sacred sexuality space. And what it looked like in sacred sexuality was a lot of men that had been doing the work of sort of yoni massages and things like this that were helping facilitate women's orgasms, women's sexual awakenings, were then having a lot of backlash for the work they were doing and using their lingams and crossing people's boundaries and different things like this. And I started to think, like, what is it that's going to make a big difference for women if they want to have these awakenings? Because I really didn't want to lose that from the world, but also not hand their power over to somebody else to facilitate that for them. And this is similar for the men as well. You know, there would be a lot of men that would come and see me that would also hand their power over to me to fix them, if for better words. And what would actually happen was I would facilitate them in a healing that they would create for themselves, but they would project that I was fixing them or healing them or helping them in that way. So, you know, the same problems on both for both genders. And, you know, the deeper, you know, there's a lot that went out there with what happened to women and all that sort of stuff, and I don't want to get into that. But I think what I started to track was the knowing that something had to shift, something had to change. And instead of me then facilitating for men and women, what I started to recognize is I could facilitate them to awaken the pleasure in their body through self-pleasure. And that was a process of me recognizing that I could do it inside of my own body and I could transmit it to them. And this happened through me experimenting a lot with a few of my girlfriends. So I would self-pleasure with them, like in the same space as them, and they were starting to unlock different parts of themselves, like being able to ejaculate, being able to reach orgasms. And it wasn't me telling them mentally how to do this. They were just having the experience inside of their body, and this was allowing them to activate, remember something inside of themselves. And so it was like the body was speaking to the body. And so I started just use this inside of my one-on-one sessions with people. Either I would self-pleasure and have them witness me, or they would self-pleasure and I would witness them. And this became a bit of a process that I started to develop. I started to see what would happen and what happened if I broke this down. What were the tools and the techniques and the things that people needed to do to access their own self-pleasure and to move away from masturbation, which is goal-orientated, chasing sort of arousal, orgasm, pleasure, and moving towards self-pleasure, which was more of a process of unlocking what was happening inside of the body to come closer to the self and to come closer to the essence of who they truly were and to explore what their sexuality even is. And this happened through a series of coming inside and using sound, breath, movement, and touch to connect and awaken the body to its limitlessness. And that was a really powerful experience for me in that time. And then it ended up developing a sort of a step-by-step modality. And I started sharing this with some of my girlfriends. They started using this in their practice spaces. And then I created a bit of a school where I started working with lots of women in the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy with this self-pleasure modality. I ended up getting the self-pleasure modality globally accredited through the SSEAA, which is like Somatic Sex Educators of Australasia, something like that. I don't remember all the words now. The other one was the ICCT, which was like International Complementary Therapy Modalities. I can't remember all the words, but yeah, these governing bodies that then supported the self-pleasure modality. I birthed the school, ended up having about over 120 something practitioners come through the school in a number of years that I was there with them. Brought on a bunch of facilitators, expanded, scaled, and then ended up exiting the school in 2023, the beginning of 2023, selling it on to one of the students was American, the other student was Canadian. They took over the school for a period of time. The school's still going now. Yeah, it was a wild time. A lot happened. I learned a lot about leadership in that time. And I really want to explore a little bit in this conversation about the things that I did unpack and uncover inside of that leadership that have really come to light for me in the last few weeks. Like I've been exploring what is next inside of the sexuality space. For me, I've been to a lot of tantric festivals, sexuality spaces, and I don't always feel strong resonance to keep showing up there. And the reason is because a lot of the concepts that are explored, I have already deeply explored. It's like my sexuality has awakened, and now what? And for me, my sexuality is not just a process of awakening and that's it, I've got a sexuality. For me, eros and sexuality is like my spiritual path. The more I come into it, the more I come into myself, the more I excavate deep presence. And the more my sexuality is awakened through deep presence and not through adrenaline. And this is the deep path that I want to facilitate and help people unlock in this lifetime. That your eros can be an awakening path. And that awakening doesn't necessarily stop once you feel your orgasm or feel more pleasure in your body. That there's not really a process of stopping the awakening. It's just like you become more and more of yourself, and that your sexuality can be the guiding light that it helps you unravel each stage of your life. For a woman, through maiden, through mother, through Marga, through crone, for a man, through the initiatory path of challenge and adversity, being able to come back to yourself, being able to connect to your life force in this way. And a lot of what I'm challenged with some of the tantra festivals that I've been to is the process of needing to keep coming back to the beginning, the basics. Let's connect to the breath, sound, breath, movement, touch. Let's come into eye gazing. Let's come into touch with presence. Like these simplicity things, they're very, very important, and I want to see them in the world, and I want these tantra festivals to continue. So that's not my challenge. But what I would like to see is something for the people that have already unlocked that stuff. So for myself and for people that are in this stage of like utilizing their eros as a pathway of awakening, what is possible? And then this takes me back to my journey of leadership through the school. So I was looking and seeking the others. You know, that first round of the Institute of Paradigm Intimacy back in 2018, I brought in 30 women, and those 30 women were already in an awakening process. They were seeking something to validate what they were experiencing and and if they weren't experiencing it through their body, they were knowing that it's possible through their mind. And they were having the journey of wanting to know how to look and awaken the DNA on a cellular level to come back to their priestess, their Dakini, this knowing of their sexual healer, the knowing of what was possible if they expanded into the fullness of their pleasure. And I believe this is always an ongoing journey for all women, and particularly this period of time when these women were called in. The process for me was really not getting them to learn something through the mind, but actually to remember something through the body. And then we stepped out of that first round, the 30 women completed, and then we went into the second round and the third round and the fourth round and the fifth round. And during this period of time, what actually happened for me was I was looking to repeat those same results. I was stepping in from this experience of like, this is a business now. I need to understand how to run a business and how to make this work like a model and how to replicate results so that I can continue supporting people. So my system went from transmitting a message and calling on the others into like, how do I keep making this fresh and new so that people are interested, drawn in, curious? And that process then became about marketing. And for me, this was the tricky part. So I started to do marketing, and I wasn't just calling the others at this point. I was calling in people that thought what I was doing was cool and thought that they would be able to find belonging in this experience. So those second, third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round for me was a process of recognizing that these people needed something different. Actually, once they were sold into the program and they were joined in, what they were looking for from me was the real mental understanding of what I was doing as a practitioner. How do you break this down? How do you facilitate this experience? How do you go in and like a doctor unlock someone's orgasm? And that was not the process for me. The process that I'd gone through was recognizing something that worked in myself and activating something in my body. So my cells were vibrating, and then that was happening around other people, which was awakening something in them. So what I was looking to facilitate for these humans was a sexual awakening inside of themselves through a self practice that allowed them to actually open and acknowledge something that was happening inside of them. And then that would then have a knock-on effect for the people around them. But the people that were coming in, who had come in through their minds because they thought something was happening that was cool, they were looking to have a mental understanding of how to fix people, how to journey with people in a way that they could make it better. So you can see there was a slight shift and challenge in this. And then what we also moved alongside of that was the trauma-informed movement. So there's a lot of conversation during these years when the school was launched about how to be trauma-informed. And I've studied, I've got a degree in this, in counseling, where we learn a lot about trauma and learn about a lot of different ways to work with it. Also have the understanding of all the different sexuality practices that I've been a part of, where we're really working deeply with people's trauma and sexual trauma especially. So there really wasn't a part of me that was concerned that I wasn't trauma informed, but what I was concerned was that they wanted it to be fed to them in a certain way. And so then I brought in specialists and I brought in all these different things. But as this happened, I was really challenged, because what was happening was people were getting more and more consumed with what was going on a mental level, wanting to track what's happening for their client on a mental level, versus having an awakening inside of themselves. So they were going further and further away from practicing their own self-pleasure, which would have created the sexual awakening, which would have been able to vibrate and move something in the other body, and more mentally consumed with how to help people through trauma. And one of the prerequisites with this experience of the self-pleasure modality was people should go and have talk therapy. And then the main thing I was teaching people was how to refer people to go and have talk therapy if they were in active trauma. So it was this really strange time where people were wanting to help people with trauma, whereas I was saying that this is something that happens once you've moved past that stage of active trauma and being quite susceptible to triggering. And so that was a super interesting time for me, and it really did put me in a position of feeling like I'm not sure that this is my role to teach this part. So this is when I brought in a group of 3 facilitators to come and teach inside of the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy, and then eventually went on to sell the school to a woman that now has a PhD in teaching, actually. So it's been super curious to me to go, okay, so what is my role inside of this? And I still have a role inside of the New Paradigm Intimacy, so which is way further back. So I kind of like help and guide and mentor from behind in a very secret private place where I can help the woman that is now running it. And I don't have anything to do with the school as far as like being out there in the world. And I feel that that's a really good position for me because I obviously deeply care about it. Yeah, there's a lot of possibility of what I see can happen with the school now that things are shifting and changing. And the second part is that it's really freed me up to say, okay, what is possible? I recently just finished another 10-day training in the International School of Temple Arts, journeying with practitioner training and looking at what it is that, looking at different ways and models that people are journeying with these pieces. And what I have been noticing that's been upwelling in me is, should we be teaching people how to mentally understand how to be a practitioner and how to work with people in this way? Or should we just be facilitating the awakening inside of people to remember that they already have the skill set for this? And it's a bit of an edgy subject in today's world because people really care about these certificates and things like this. And what I really believe is that, sexual healing and this awakening of our own sexuality and like this opening to our pleasure and our orgasmic potential actually happens in community, and it happens with others. And I've been wondering, what does that look like for me? And especially the deeper I go into my own experience of being in deep union, being in marriage, being in a place of the householder, really. And how does the witch and the householder and the priestess and the dakini, how do they all come together? And how do I facilitate something that is not just going to create another model that calls in people through marketing, but actually calls people to a remembering inside of themselves so that they can awaken and have this process for themselves? And after the whole trauma-informed space and really needing to work on getting people to get this on a mental level, I was a bit like, I don't know if I'm even supposed to teach in this format anymore. Like, I don't even know if this is me. I don't even know if I want this. I went through feelings of anger, feelings of just like feeling like a fraud, feeling like, maybe this industry is just not for me anymore. Maybe there's, and especially when I first started calling out, there was a real like rebel nature to the way that I was inviting people into this. And then that shifted, people were not, it's not rebellious to be a sex coach anymore. It's not rebellious to be a sexuality practitioner. So the kind of people that were wanting this work were very different from the kind of people I was calling in the first place. So yeah, it's been a big journey. It's been a process of me just wondering, like, who am I inside of this space? I went through a lot of just being like, this is not for me. I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to play in the outer role. I brought a woman's lubricant company, the Yoni Elixir, that you will be aware of, and the links below to check that out. And I felt like this was actually how I was going to do it. So now with Yoni Elixir, like I hand make all of this. I drop in and I play the harp to it. I do a prayer with it. I put all of this juju, this like vibrational understanding that I have of how transmission works, into the Yoni Elixir, with the understanding that I can actually transmit it through people connecting in with their self-pleasure. So it was kind of like a come all the way back to basics moment for me. And just that recognizing of like, this is actually how it works. And then now I'm in this place of being wondering like, okay, so what is it going to look like if I start to come back into service, come back into facilitating? And what would that look and feel like? And I'm playing around now with the idea of sex lab. So a friend of mine, he created something called the Open World Theatre. The Open World Theatre is a space where people get beyond boundaries and consent. They get beyond, they work with more of this like law of the jungle and the understanding that like there's no separation from here and life. We don't need a container to hold us or a facilitator to baby us. We don't need to hand our power off to somebody else to then have an experience that we can facilitate for ourselves. And this really sparked something inside of me that was like, what happens if we do that with sexuality? Because the whole of the sexuality space has been, had a big wash through of like, we need boundaries and consent. We need to teach people this stuff. And I'm in 100% agreement with that. But I would also like to see a space where we can explore sexuality without the understanding of anything to be so focused on boundaries and consent and, separating it from the outside world. And what happens if we create a space where a community can come together and keep each other safe and keep each other held accountable and not let things go past by, but also let the instinctual wildness of our true nature be expressed in the world. So that's really the edge that I've been exploring and bringing this sex lab to people. And, it started off with a group of myself and my facilitated friends in a mansion in Bali going, okay, let's have a week where we just facilitate each other through whatever opening needs to happen next. And so we had this boardroom in the mansion, and I would just sit somebody in the hot seat and we would just explore this idea of where is your evolutionary edge of Eros at? And through that exploration, I would ask them a bunch of questions. Then maybe I'd bring a few people in to say, maybe you're going to play this for that person. This person's going to hold this part for you. And then we just explore like a scene that opened up that evolutionary Eros moment for them. Then, this got explored inside of my friend's open world container. So it was a group of people that were already living inside of a paradigm of law of the jungle and exploring things in a scene-like way. And then I started bringing that into circle work, where I would invite people to come in and express maybe something that what their evolutionary age of Eros was, or a part of them that hadn't been explored or seen yet. And then inside of that was just coming in as like a director to just like either be a body to meet that body, to let the energy move through them, or to transmit Eros, whatever that piece was that was going on for them was just starting to activate and open. Then I started to hold it through my own circles. And again, it got super interesting. I just brought through a bunch of principles, which I'm going to share on another video, and invited the circle to come into these principles. And I've been sitting with and wanting to listen more and more to what this sex lab wants to be. And what's coming alive for me next is I need to keep listening to what the community is wanting and getting an understanding of what is possible. And so I'm going to continue running those, and I want to look at a model that is less focused on making a bunch of practitioners, but also honoring that facilitating something like this and giving people permission for what can happen in a circle is powerful, and that community can be built. So I want to, track what happens when we don't trademark something, when we let something new come into the field and not be owned by somebody. All right, it's getting super dark now, so I'm going to hang up the call and I'm going to do another vlog another time. But thank you for watching. I appreciate this, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.